Coming up, we check in with a tribal collaboration in Wisconsin making strides in resource management and agriculture. Plus, an Alaska Native woman is weaving her nation's culture into her first children's book. And we meet the Iñupiaq woman using data to fight for missing and murdered Alaska Natives. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Thank you for joining us. We start today on the West Coast, where administrators from various California state universities faced tough questions from lawmakers last week. At the heart of the discussion are the high number of Native American human remains and items that have not been returned to tribal nations, even though federal and state laws require it. Indigenous leaders filled the California state capitol in Sacramento last week, and they wanted answers. At a joint oversight hearing, lawmakers pressed into why the 23 campuses that make up the California State University system have not returned nearly 700,000 Native American human remains and cultural artifacts to tribal nations. This number comes from an audit completed by the state and is a direct violation of the federal law, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, as well as its state counterpart, CalNAGPRA. The two laws say that any institution receiving federal funding must return these remains and items to the tribal nations they come from. The chairman of the Redding Rancheria remembers his experience seeing ancestors on shelves at UC Berkeley 2 years ago.
The grandchildren had no skulls. There was only little leg bones and feet bones. We have to go through this, and we shouldn't. Our people should be left lying to rest.
California's only Native American state lawmaker, James Ramos, called for the investigation. Auditors found that of the 21 CSU campuses with stocks, only one has repatriated the majority of its collection. That means only 6% of the CSU system's total collections have been returned.
When we got to the CSU and we reviewed the progress that they have made, I have to be completely honest, we were completely disappointed.
In our view, these campus perspectives, along with the results of our survey, reinforce that CSU has not historically viewed compliance with NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA as a priority.
Only 12 campuses have completed an audit of their collections, with the lawmakers only expecting the number of items to grow. So what exactly has been the holdup?
Our universities have lacked the policies, dedicated funding, and staff.
This process requires and deserves dedicated staff, having a full-time repatriation coordinator.
For Chico State, the biggest challenge to compliance has been the lack of accurate documentation for many sites.
The representative of all the schools, the CSU interim chancellor, did not show up at the hearing, citing a family medical issue. The CSU has hired a full-time leader, Mildred Garcia, who will inherit this issue when she assumes office on October 1st. Both the Democratic and Republican Assembly members pushed for accountability and for Native voices to be at the table in repatriation discussions.
When you're talking about tribes, you're talking about sovereign nations. And I'm a military guy, so I think about when we got to go get our remains of our soldiers overseas, you don't ask the foreign country, hey, handle our remains the way you want to. It's done the way we want them to handle it.
Ramos says he is now introducing emergency legislation that would require CSU schools to give progress reports on repatriation efforts every year to the state's legislature. Reporting from Phoenix, Arizona, Aaliyah Chavez, ICT News. ICT reached out to the CSU Chancellor's office for a comment and did not hear back by the time of this newscast. In Scotland, a national museum is returning a totem pole to the native people it was stolen from almost a century ago. Carved from red cedar in the 1860s, the 36-foot pole is going back to the Nisga'a Nation in British Columbia, Canada. It commemorates a Nisga'a warrior who was next in line to be chief but was killed in conflict. The totem pole stood outside the home of the warrior's relative for 70 years before it was stolen, while villagers were away for hunting season. Now the museum, which has had the totem on display since 1930, is working on the delicate process of removing it, packing it, and flying it. A spiritual ceremony at the museum marked the beginning of the journey home. This is part of an initiative from museums across Europe to return artifacts to their homes. We turn now to Louisiana, where the U.S. Navy recently christened the new Navajo class of rescue, towing, and salvage ships. Navajo Nation Council members joined U.S. Navy officials and Navajo veterans to celebrate the historic event on August 26th. Dene citizen Jocelyn Billy Upshaw had the honor of smashing a champagne bottle over the ship's bow. Later, Navajo officials offered corn pollen to bless the vessel for a safe and productive life. The new Navajo class honors the famous Navajo code talkers from the World War II era and all Navajo military veterans. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Jeff Mears is the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council. The group is finding strength and success in numbers. All 11 tribes in the state participate in the council and share knowledge and expertise and work together to forge more productive relationships with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and other federal agencies. ICT's Stewart Huntington caught up with Mears last week.
Hello, sir. Welcome to our show. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so we work with the 11 federally recognized tribes in Wisconsin. We have a WCAC, Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council. We have a board with a representative and an alternate that's been assigned by each of the 11 tribes. And we work with the USDA NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. This whole goal is to provide tribes an opportunity to work directly with them to influence policy, to develop programs, and Tribal Conservation Advisory Councils were formed in response to the 1995 Farm Bill. States had similar setups, the tribes didn't. So as NRCS staff and tribal leaders pushed for this, and proud to say that the Wisconsin one, the WCAC, was the first one formed in the nation. So we meet regularly with USDA staff and the tribes to talk about programs, program implementation, technical assistance.
You're more effective working together with the federal agency than if you try to do it all individually, 11 tribes working separately?
Absolutely. That's the whole idea. Tribes are limited in staff. They can't have experts in each area. So this is a way we can work with them without them, say, having to hire someone to understand and work directly with NRCS. And the very unique thing, so the federal programs are huge. USDA is a really large agency, but with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, they have an EQIP program. And I'm sorry for all the acronyms. These are all the federal things, but it's the Environmental Quality Improvement Program. So that's where landowners can get reimbursed for doing things on the land that protect natural resources, like from erosion or things like that. There's a lot of different programs that they have. So the tribes have been able to introduce a lot of these reimbursable type programs that they didn't have before, including things like for aquaculture or for wild rice, things that are important to the tribes. The USDA goal for agriculture is to be part of the climate change solution, not just part of the problem. And so we currently do work with tribal governments, but this is an opportunity to work with tribal producers, agricultural producers.
And work with them on food safety, which can also have an economic development component.
Absolutely. It's all part of it. So one of the things we're trying to do is just get this produce with safety out there. And we're thinking many of the tribes just have community gardens. Ho-Chunk, for example, they have that. They have several of their educational facilities. Ho-Chunk is spread out quite a bit, and they each had community gardens in it that they had the students work in. Our job was to educate those that were working with the students of how to handle produce safely. Could the tribe look at economic opportunity? Yes, this would be part of it. All their workers should be trained. We also want to work with tribal producers, those within reservation tribal members, looking for those opportunities to sell at farmers markets.
Do you see a day when the tribes are marketing their output under one umbrella?
I think that's the big picture, to reestablish these trading that tribes have done for millennia, and now to look at it in modern day today, how they're going to redevelop those trading connections.
Super exciting. And it seems like, as you said, that Wisconsin was the first state to come together under the 95 Farm Bill.
Right, for the Tribal Conservation Advisory Councils is the first one in the nation. Yep.
You guys are leaders in this.
I think so. We've had an opportunity to work with other, like, for example, the tribes in Minnesota, presented to them several times of what we formed in Wisconsin. They have the opportunity to do the same thing, and the same with Michigan. So, yeah, it is just a way to come together, and there's much more power when we're working all together. And these auxiliary programs that can be developed from that. At first, it started just dealing with natural resources, but now because we're working with USDA, it's agriculture. And, obviously there's that nexus between agriculture and natural resources. You can't have healthy farming without a healthy environment, and you can't have a healthy environment unless your practices in agriculture don't hurt your environment. So it's just a really good connection.
Sounds like you're optimistic for the future, sir.
I do. One of the things I've always liked is there's been several food sovereignty conferences. Oneida's hosted them, and they have a very simple message. You can't be a sovereign nation unless you can feed yourself. And I think that really stands to tribes about who they were and who they're going to be in the future. It addresses so many things, homeland security, climate change. There's no reason we should be eating vegetables that are shipped across the country when they can be grown locally. That builds economy, that builds security. So, yeah, I do think tribes, I've just seen a renewed interest in everything food and agriculture, looking at what they can do.
That's fantastic. Jeff Mears, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, thank you.
Author Nasuġraq Rainey Hopson's new book, Eagle Drums, is a retelling of how the Iñupiaq Messenger Feast came to be. In this profile, Hobson talks to ICT about the history and creation of her debut book.
Iñupiaq traditions are at the heart of a new kids' book called Eagle Drums. For many Indigenous nations, histories and stories told within the oral tradition are being lost. Nasuġraq Rainey Hopson is making sure at least one story will be retold to the next generation.
We're kind of in the middle of a re-emergence of stories, because a lot of these stories barely survived all of the stuff of our culture, all the trials that we've had in our culture. And so this one would be told during the Iñupiaq, the Messenger Feast that the elders started doing again in the 80s. So this is a story that is told around that time. I mean, it wasn't really, they were really focused on reclaiming and building up this feast. And so that was their main purpose when they first started this, because it was lost for 100 years and they were not allowed to celebrate it at all. So this story would have been dug up, and all the details of the story would have been dug up around that same time. But when I read the story, it only had maybe a few paragraphs. It was very short. It was very brief, and kind of just, not a lot of people remember too much detail. And part of that is because it's an oral story. 3/4 of the story is the presence and the whole entire thing. Well, I took that story, that very short story, and I used it kind of like bones. It made the structure of the story. It kind of decided where I was going to go and what's going to happen, because that was important to the story, this Iñupiaq. And then I took our culture And I used that as the flesh. I built the story around our own culture and what would be appropriate for a person of that time, pre-contact. And yeah, so so I added a lot. I added a lot of background to the main character. I added a lot of explanations, because when I'm talking to someone from my culture and I say, this and this, then they automatically will know, a whole bunch of stuff. If I talk about the drums, they know about the drums, what they look like, what they sound like, all this type of stuff. So I had to add a lot of that into the story, so people who are not from our culture will understand and enjoy it, and really understand the story and where it's trying to go.
For many Indigenous writers, there isn't one set path to getting your work published. Hobson tells us about the time and effort to get this story from a few paragraphs into a full book.
I would run into all these stories and read all these interviews from elders and just interview elders, and I had a mentor at the time that was really encouraging me to kind of build my cultural just knowledge. And I loved it. And I saw this story and I was like, man, what would it be like to fly with the eagles? And that's where it started. And I said, well, I write. So I was like, I'm going to write. I'm going to see what it would be like. And it literally took me 3 days, and it was just to put it on paper. And it was horrible. Don't get me wrong. It was very horrible. But I was like, this is really neat. This is something that I would love, reading when I was a kid, when I was young. And so I was determined to clean it up. And I presented it to my mentor at the time, who worked for the school district. And she goes, finish it and we'll do something with it. And I'm like, okay. So that's what I did. And they actually published it for a minute, and they used it in their English classes. So that was about 13, 14 years ago. And then after that, I didn't really think about it at all until my another mentor of mine, who is a writer, I took a class from her at a little college up north. And she's like, come to a writer's retreat with me with other Native American writers and see what they think, and see if you could go somewhere with this story. And that's where it started. It was an amazing experience just to be around other writers and see what they were doing, and just the energy. And that alone propelled me to go try and take this someplace else, try and get it published. And that happened pretty fast, but it was like 10, 13 years of nothing, pretty much, besides working on it and working on my own skills with writing, which is really important. Yeah.
With so few Indigenous writers in the state and none in her region to learn from, Nasuġraq Rainey Hopson says she will make sure she's just the first of many.
I realized it would have been nice if I had somebody that I could talk to. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I won't be great at it probably, and I'll make a lot of mistakes and I'll fumble, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to be at least a person that's there. And so that was really important to me. And so with that in mind, with that goal in mind of being, becoming obsolete as a writer, hopefully there's going to be tons and tons of children's writers from our culture. But that's how I approached everything. I said, I'm going to learn as much as I could. I've been writing since I was really young. I've been a reader since I was really young. So I had a good base. And that's how I figured out where I'm going to go, who I'm going to talk to. And luckily I had really good people around me that did know what they were doing and been doing it for a very long time. And it was like a huge, huge help. And I lucked out with editors and with my agent, who helped me grow. That was the first thing I said was, I need to grow. I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm probably not going to know the simplest of things. I still double space when I write because, I'm from the 90s.
For now, it seems, this traditional feast filled with Alaska Native music, dance, and community has a stronger connection from past to present. In Bismarck, North Dakota, Vincent Moniz, ICT News.
Alaska public safety officials recently released their first report tracking missing and murdered Native Alaskans. But it wasn't the first such report in the state. Indigenous leaders compiled their own database a couple of years ago. Charlene Iñupiaq was part of that effort. ICT's Stewart Huntington asked about the long road that got her state where it is today.
Uvanga Charlene Iñupiaq Iñupiaq Siska Akpik, Chinik Mugurunga, Suli Nachivik Mugurunga, Akaga, Senja Babylu Iñupiaq, Ihnaga Evan Muklan, Savaktunga, Data for Indigenous Justice Me. So the translation is, my name is Charlene
Iñupiaq has been working for years on the front lines of MMIP issues in Alaska. I asked her about the early years of the work.
Yeah, so this is a wonderful story. I'm glad that you asked. So years ago at the Alaska Federation of Natives, community organizers really wanted to call attention to this issue and hold a rally and read the names of loved ones, only to find that there was no data and it wasn't being tracked and it couldn't be pulled. And so our families and our communities came forward and started sharing the names of their loved ones. And that became the first database. That became the first, we wrote it down and we kept track of it and we heard those stories and we heard that it was happening across the state and so many times over time. And so that began really the heart work of the database being tracked here in Alaska. And then that was picked up and carried forward through Data for Indigenous Justice. And that was really hard to do because 4 boxes of race and ethnicity often don't capture who we are. It wasn't being tracked in case classification and so many other, we can go line by line, but it was very hard to track and it wasn't public available information. And so it's been a long road to get here.
Were the public safety folks interested in accessing your data?
No. So one thing that's unique about Data for Indigenous Justice is we really operate off of having data sovereignty. And so that means, it partially means that tribal people and Indigenous people are collecting information about themselves for themselves and for the benefit of themselves, and leading that change to improve, the communities and the families' lives and well-being. And so our data is not for giving back to law enforcement. They should and have data that's accessible to them that they can improve collection upon. But our purpose is first and foremost for Indigenous peoples and tribal people to have information so they can self-determine change on this issue.
And you have people who work with families.
Yeah, so Data for Indigenous Justice is just one of other organizations. That's one of the strengths of something really exciting happening here in Alaska is we have really strong partnerships. And so we work with other folks, Alaska Native Heritage Center, the Justice Center, Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, and Native Movement. We all partner together every single week to work on this issue. And some of the organizations do provide direct services. So we're able to, hand over in a good way when families come to us wondering what they can do. There are services provided that we can refer them to. DIJ, of course, focuses on the data and having informed decision-making and providing the information needed for advocacy. So when we released our report 2 years ago, in 2021, that was the first Alaska-specific MMIW report. So 2 years ago, there was a report released already on this issue by DIJ, and that has since been used to draft legislation to have city recognition bills and things like that. The governor's recognition bill also cited the figure from the report that we put out 2 years ago.
Having someone to work with the families is so important. Confronting silence from officials can be a rough road.
Right. And so that's where, again, I think data speaks so much, right? So there have unfortunately been families who have been experiencing this for over decades, over time. And often it felt like they were just one family, one person trying to keep asking. And so when we come together and we have reports like this, and the one that we did at DIJ, we can see that this sadly has been happening over decades of time across the state, but that also means that families aren't alone. right? And then we can come together and start creating solutions and advocating together. So while these reports are really kind of, you take your breath away when you see that there's hundreds of missing Indigenous peoples, for that, this new report points to that. We should be able to look at that and say, wow, this is a real issue, and it's been happening over decades of time. Something needs to change.
Charlene, do you think we're at a moment of change? Do you have hope for the coming months and years?
Yeah, I do. So it's doing this work day in and day out is it's really hard, but I'm inspired by families who have been doing this for so long for their loved ones, and that really we're just trying to be the wind beneath their wings and push the systemic issues and make sure that we have this moment in time to create real change. Sometimes it feels like we have so much more to do, which is very true. This is just the beginning, but I'm also very proud of how much has been done so far.
Charlene, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.